a quiet archive record. Tonight, we are stepping into a slow unfolding, a conversation that spans not years, not centuries, but millennia. 13,000 years of memory, of loss, of watching the world remake itself again and again and again. Settle in, let the outside world dissolve, and gently descend into tonight's world. The being before us has no single name. They have worn thousands of them, shed like old skin across the ages. For tonight, they have chosen the name they were given at the beginning, before the curse, before the endless walking. They call themselves Kael. Kael was born in what we would now call the Fertile Crescent, in the final centuries of the last ice age, when humanity was just beginning to plant seeds, to stay in one place, to dream of something beyond mere survival. 13,000 years ago, Kael made a choice, and that choice cost them everything, and gave them everything in equal measure. This is an interview with an immortal. Chapter 1, The Curse. I asked Kael how it began. They were silent for a long time, as if reaching back through layers of memory so deep, so compressed by time, that finding the beginning required excavation. Then they spoke. I was young. By the standards of my people, I was barely past childhood, perhaps 17 summers. Though we did not count years the way you do now, we counted by floods, by harvests, by the migrations of birds that no longer exist. My tribe lived beside a river that has long since changed its course. We were among the first to try something new, to scatter seeds deliberately, to wait for them to grow. It seems so obvious now, but then it was revolutionary, dangerous even. The old ways were known, the new ways were not. Our village was small, 40 people, maybe 50 during the good seasons when travelers joined us. We lived in structures of mud and reeds, rebuilt every few years when the floods came too high. Nothing permanent. We didn't believe in permanence. The river taught us that everything flows, everything changes. I had a sister, younger than me by 3 summers. She was everything. When our mother died giving birth to her, I became her world, and she became mine. Her name was Enna. It meant morning light in our language, a language that hasn't been spoken aloud for 11,000 years, except by me, in the quiet moments when I need to remember who I was. Enna followed me everywhere. When I went to gather reeds for baskets, she came. When I went to check the fish traps, she came. When I sat by the fire and listened to the elders tell stories of how the world began, she sat beside me, her head on my shoulder, breathing softly. I loved her more than anything I've loved since, and I've had 13,000 years to love. Kael paused. Even after all this time, something flickered behind their eyes. There was a sickness. It came with the spring floods. Something in the water, perhaps, or something carried by the traders who had passed through weeks before. We didn't understand disease the way you do now. We thought it was spirits, angry spirits that had been disturbed by our new farming, our new ways of living. One by one, my people began to fall. First the elders, then the children. The strong seemed to resist longer, but eventually they fell too. I watched my uncle die, the man who had taught me to fish, to track animals, to read the weather in the clouds. He was the strongest person I knew. He lasted 5 days after the fever took him. I held his hand at the end, and I felt the moment when whatever made him who he was simply left. Then Enna began to cough. My sister was among the first of the young to show signs. The fever, the trembling, the way her eyes would lose focus, as if she was already looking at something beyond this world. I did everything, every remedy our healers knew. Cool water on her forehead, herbs boiled into bitter tea, prayers to every spirit whose name I could remember. I barely slept for days, weeks. I watched her body weaken, watched her cheeks hollow, watched the light in her eyes flicker like a flame running out of fuel. And still, she faded one night near what I was certain would be the end. I walked to the edge of our village. I looked up at stars that hadn't changed, that seemed to mock me with their permanence while everything I loved was dying. And I screamed. I screamed at the sky, at the spirits, at whatever forces controlled the world. I demanded they take me instead. I begged, I bargained, and someone answered. They appeared between one heartbeat and the next, a traveler, old beyond old, wrapped in cloths that seemed to shift color even in the darkness. Their face was... I couldn't describe it, not because it was strange, but because it kept changing. Every time I looked, it was slightly different, as if they weren't quite fixed in reality. They said they had heard me. They said they could help, but nothing is free. Nothing has ever been free. They told me they could save her, my sister. They could pull her back from the edge of death. But in exchange, I would have to carry something, a burden. They called it a gift. But even then, even in my desperation, I knew that was a lie. I asked what they demanded. They said, "You want to save her from death. Very well, but death must take something. If not her, then the possibility of you, your ending, your rest, your completion." I didn't understand. I asked them to explain. They smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of something that has watched countless creatures make the same mistake and finds amusement in the repetition. "You will live," they said. "You will live and live and live. While everything around you dies, you will continue. That is the price. That is the bargain." I didn't hesitate. I didn't ask how long. I didn't ask what it would feel like. I didn't ask if there was another way. I just said yes. In that moment, I would have agreed to anything. Enna was dying. My little sister who called me Sunrise, because I always woke before her. My little sister who saved the best pieces of fish for me. My little sister who was all I had left of my mother, of my family, of everything that mattered. I said yes, and the traveler reached out and touched my forehead, just one finger, pressed against the space between my eyes. Felt something pour into me, cold at first, like river water in winter, flooding through my veins, then burning, like fire spreading through dry grass, then nothing, a void where sensation should be, as if the part of me that could feel had been scooped out and replaced with silence. When I could see again, they were gone. The traveler vanished, as if they had never been there at all. And Enna, she was sitting up. The fever had broken. The color had returned to her cheeks. She looked at me, confused but alive, so wonderfully alive. And she said, "Kael, why are you crying?" I thought I had won. I hadn't. The full weight of what I had done didn't become clear for years. At first, I was just grateful. Enna recovered completely. She was weak for a while, but she healed. The sickness passed from our village eventually, leaving many dead, but not everyone. life continued. But something had changed in me. I noticed it slowly. Cuts healed faster than they should. Bruises faded overnight. I got sick once, a minor fever, and woke the next morning completely well, as if my body had simply rejected the illness. And I didn't age. Enna grew older, taller. She became a woman. She fell in love with a young man from a neighboring tribe. She married. She had children. And I looked exactly the same as I had the night I made my bargain. People started to notice. At first, they said I was blessed, touched by spirits. They treated me with reverence, which made me uncomfortable but seemed harmless. Then the reverence turned to something else. Fear, suspicion, whispers that I was unnatural, that I had made some dark deal, that I was dangerous. They weren't wrong. When Enna's first grandchild was born, I looked the same age as her son. When her hair turned grey, mine stayed dark. When she grew frail and needed help walking, I could still run as fast as any young hunter. She knew. Somehow, she knew. She never asked what I had done, but she knew. The way she looked at me sometimes, with gratitude and grief and something that might have been pity. When she died, an old woman surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, I sat beside her bed, looking exactly as I had when I was 17. Her last words to me were, "Thank you. I'm sorry. Go and live." I've been trying to follow that advice for 13,000 years. Some days, I almost succeed. Chapter 2. The First Millennia. What were those early centuries like? After you understood what you were, Kael's expression shifted. Something between wonder and weariness. Confusion. Mostly confusion. I knew I wasn't aging, but I didn't understand what that meant. How could I? No one had ever experienced what I was experiencing. There was no framework, no stories, no guidance. At first, I thought it was temporary, a condition that would eventually wear off. The traveler would return, demand something of me, and release me. I waited. Years became decades. Decades became something else. Time moved differently then. We didn't have calendars the way you do now. We didn't count years numerically. The years blurred together like watercolors bleeding into one another. One harvest, another, another. One flood season, another. Eventually, I stopped trying to count. I watched my sister's children grow old, and their children after that, generation after generation, all carrying some small piece of her. I became the strange uncle who never aged, then the village elder who had always been there, then a legend, then a spirit, then something like a god. That last one was dangerous. Why dangerous? Because they wanted things from me. When you become a god to people, they expect miracles. They bring you their sick children, their dying crops, their broken hearts. They kneel before you and beg for help. And you can't help them. You can only watch. The curse gives me immortality, not power. I can't heal anyone. I can't bring rain. I can't do anything except continue existing while everyone around me dies. Eventually, they realize you're not a god at all. Just a thing that won't die. Just an aberration. A mistake in the order of the world. And that frightens them. Fear turns to anger. Anger turns to violence. I learned this the hard way, more than once. The first time they tried to kill me, I was genuinely surprised. These were people I had lived among for generations, people whose grandparents I had known. And suddenly, they were surrounding me with spears and torches, calling me demon, demanding I leave or die. I tried to reason with them. That was a mistake. When people are that afraid, reason means nothing. They attacked. And I discovered another aspect of my curse. I don't just fail to age. I can't be killed. They stabbed me, cut me, beat me with stones, and each wound closed almost as soon as it opened. The blood stopped flowing, the flesh knit back together. I lay there, surrounded by people trying to destroy me, and my body simply refused to be destroyed. That frightened them more than anything else. They ran, screaming, convinced I was some kind of monster. They weren't entirely wrong. I learned to leave before that happened, before the reverence curdled into fear, before the prayers became accusations. I developed a sense for when the turning point was coming, and I would simply vanish, slip away in the night, become a story they told their children, eventually forgotten. I became a traveler, a stranger passing through, someone who arrives from nowhere, stays briefly, and disappears before anyone can notice that my face doesn't change, that I never get sick, that wounds close on my body like water filling a footprint. Where did you go in those early millennia? Everywhere that people were, I walked from my homeland, following rivers, crossing mountains, exploring coastlines. I had no destination, just movement. As long as I was moving, I didn't have to think about what I had become. I saw humanity spread like seeds on the wind, small groups breaking off from larger ones, migrating into new territories, settling, growing, flourishing, dying out, starting again somewhere else. I watched them build the first true cities, mud brick towers reaching towards skies they barely understood. I was in Uruk when it was the largest city in the world, perhaps 50,000 people. It seemed impossible that so many humans could live in one place. The noise, the smell, the constant movement. I watched them invent writing. I was there when some forgotten genius first pressed a reed into soft clay and made a mark that meant something. They had no idea what they were creating. None of them did. They thought it was just a better way to track grain shipments. They didn't realize they were creating a way to conquer death, to send their thoughts forward through time, to speak to people who wouldn't be born for millennia. I learned their writing and every writing system that came after, languages that evolved, transformed, split into daughter tongues, and died. I've spoken languages that have been extinct for 10,000 years. I've sung songs that no one alive today has ever heard. Do you know what I miss most from those early times? What? The stars, the night sky before cities, before light pollution, before the air itself became hazy with smoke and dust. When I was young, when I was still mortal, the night sky was overwhelming, thousands upon thousands of stars, so many that the darkness was almost bright. The river of light you call the Milky Way was so vivid, so present, it felt like you could reach up and touch it. Now, even in the darkest places on Earth, it's not quite the same. Something has been lost, something irreplaceable. I remember lying beside Enna when she was small, pointing out the patterns our people saw in the stars. The great hunter, the river fish, the dancing sisters. Stories that are older than any civilization that ever wrote them down. Those patterns are still there, but the stories are gone. No one remembers what they meant, just me. Did you ever try to end it in those early times? A long pause. Yes, many times. More than I can count. I threw myself from cliffs. I drowned in rivers, held myself underwater until my lungs burned and my vision went dark. I walked into fires, let the flames consume me until I was nothing but charred bone. I let wild animals tear me apart, lions and wolves and creatures that have since gone extinct. Each time, I woke, whole, healed, alone. Sometimes the healing took minutes, sometimes hours. Once, after being trampled by a mammoth herd, it took nearly a day. But I always healed. The body repaired itself no matter how thoroughly it had been destroyed. The curse, or whatever it is, doesn't allow death, not true death. I've been stabbed, burned, crushed, poisoned, frozen, and 100 other things your modern world has invented new words for. I once fell from a cliff so high that I had time to watch the ground rushing toward me for nearly a minute. I woke up in the wreckage of my own body and watched it put itself back together. None of it matters. The body repairs. The heart keeps beating. The breath keeps coming. After the first few centuries, I stopped trying, not because I accepted my condition, because trying and failing, over and over, was worse than simply enduring. I learned to endure. That became my skill, my art, my curse within the curse. And so, I walked, millennium after millennium, watching, waiting. For what? I still don't know. Chapter 3. Empires rise and fall. Tell me about the great civilizations you witnessed. Kael almost smiled, a faint thing, there and gone. You want to know about Egypt, about Rome, about the names that survived long enough for you to learn them in your schools. But for every empire you remember, there were a dozen you've never heard of, kingdoms that lasted centuries, that built wonders, that believed they would exist forever, and left no trace. That's the first thing immortality teaches you. Nothing survives, not even memory. I walked through cities whose names have been forgotten entirely. I attended coronations of kings whose dynasties lasted 1,000 years and are now less than dust. I watched religions rise and transform and consume each other, each one absolutely certain it possessed the only truth. History is not a record of what happened. It's a record of what people chose to remember. And people choose very selectively, but some things did survive. The ones we know about. Yes, let me tell you about Egypt, since everyone always asks about Egypt. I was there before the first pharaoh, before they built anything in stone, when the Nile was just another river, and the people along its banks were farmers and fishers like any others. The delta was different then, greener. The Sahara was still becoming a desert, still had pockets of grassland and life. The people who would become Egyptians didn't know they were special. They were just trying to survive like everyone else. I watched them grow, year by year, generation by generation. I saw them develop the mathematics to measure their flooded fields. I saw them create a writing system so their priests could track the harvest. I saw them unite, slowly, painfully, through wars and marriages and betrayals, under rulers who claimed divine right. And then they started building. The pyramids. You cannot imagine what it was like to watch them rise. Not from pictures, not from descriptions, to actually stand there, year after year, watching thousands of people move millions of stones, creating something that would outlast almost everything else humanity ever made. They weren't built by slaves, whatever your movies tell you. They were built by farmers during the flood season when they couldn't work their fields. Built by people who believed they were helping their God King achieve eternal life. Built with a faith so absolute, so unquestioning, that it could move mountains. Literally. I worked on the Great Pyramid for 11 years, hauling stones, mixing mortar, just another laborer in an army of laborers. No one noticed that I was the same age at the end as at the beginning. There was too much work, too many people, too much chaos. I asked one of the architects once, why? Why build something so massive, so permanent, when the pharaoh it honored would be dead long before it was finished? Do you know what he said? What? He said, because we can. Because we want those who come after to know that we were here, that we mattered, that we reached toward forever, even if we couldn't touch it. I think about that sometimes, reaching toward forever. They had no idea they were talking to someone who had actually touched it, who knew exactly how cold, how empty forever actually is. I wanted to tell him, don't bother. Nothing lasts. Not even pyramids. Not really. They'll be worn down by wind and sand and time until they're just lumps in the desert. Your name will be forgotten. Your pharaoh's name will be forgotten. The language you're speaking will be dead for millennia before anyone thinks to resurrect it. But I didn't, because what was the point? He was happy. He believed in something. And who was I to take that away? What about Greece? Ah, Greece. The people who believed they invented thinking, who looked at the messy chaos of myth and tradition and said, no, we can do better. We can use reason. We can understand. I was in Athens during its golden age. I heard Socrates speak in the agora, that annoying persistent voice asking questions no one wanted to answer. I watched the Parthenon rise on the Acropolis, another monument to gods who would eventually be forgotten. The Greeks fascinated me. They were the first people I encountered who seemed genuinely interested in what I was, not as a god or a demon, but as a puzzle, a phenomenon to be understood. I almost told them, almost confessed everything, but I had learned caution by then. I had seen what happened when people discovered my nature. So I kept quiet, participated in their philosophical debates, asked questions, listened. They would have loved to dissect me. In the name of knowledge, of course. Everything terrible is done in the name of something noble. What about Rome? Rome was different. Egypt reached for eternity through stone. Greece reached for it through ideas. Rome reached for it through conquest. I lived in Rome for 3 centuries, on and off. It was the first place I stayed that long since my homeland. Something about it fascinated me. The ambition, the arrogance, the absolute certainty that they were the center of the world, and always would be. I watched it grow from a city of brick to a city of marble. I walked its streets when Augustus reigned, when the empire was new and confident. I heard emperors declare themselves gods, and I laughed quietly because I had seen what happened to gods. I watched them build roads that connected the known world, straight lines carved through forests and mountains, as if nature itself should bend to Roman will. I watched their aqueducts carry water over mountains and across valleys, engineering so brilliant that some of it still works today. I watched them create a legal system that would outlast their legions by millennia, laws that tried to bring order to the decay of human relations, fair laws, sometimes brutal laws, often but laws, structure, an attempt to build something that wasn't just about who had the biggest sword. And I watched it fall. People always ask what caused the fall of Rome. Barbarians at the gates, economic collapse, political corruption, lead poisoning, Christianity destroying the old warrior culture. The answer is simpler. Everything falls. Given enough time, everything falls. Rome just fell more dramatically than most. I was there when the Visigoths sacked the city. Standing in the forum I had walked for 300 years, watching men on horses ride through temples that had stood for centuries. The locals couldn't believe it. They kept saying, "But this is Rome. This is eternal. Nothing is eternal, except me." And I would trade that eternity for a single mortal lifetime in a heartbeat. I left Rome after the sack. There was nothing left for me there, just ruins and memories and the smell of smoke that lingered for weeks. What did you learn from watching empires? That they all tell the same story. Rise, peak, fall. The names change. The languages change. The flags change. But the arc is always the same. First comes the struggle. People fighting together against something bigger than themselves. That unity creates strength. Strength creates victory. Victory creates power. Then comes the peak, the golden age, the moment when everything seems possible, when the future stretches out endless and bright. That's when they build the monuments, the pyramids, the colosseums, the great walls and temples and libraries. Then comes the rot. It always starts inside. Corruption, complacency, the belief that because something has lasted, it will last forever. The people at the top start to believe they deserve to be there. The people at the bottom start to believe nothing will ever change. Both are wrong. Then the fall, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but always inevitable. I've seen this cycle hundreds of times. In Egypt, in Rome, in Persia, in China, in empires that ruled continents and are now just footnotes in history books. And every single time, the people living through it believe they're different, that their empire is special, that the rules don't apply to them. They're always wrong. Did you witness civilizations beyond the Mediterranean world? Of course. The Mediterranean was just one corner of the human story. While Rome was rising, China was building walls that could be seen from mountains. While Greece debated philosophy, India was developing mathematics that wouldn't reach Europe for 1,000 years. I walked the Silk Road before it had that name. Caravans stretching across deserts that seemed infinite. Merchants trading goods that had traveled farther than any single person could travel in a lifetime. Silk from the east, gold from the west. Ideas flowing in both directions, slowly, like water finding its way through stone. I lived in Chang'an when it was the largest city in the world. 1 million people. Markets that sold goods from every corner of the known world. Poetry that would survive millennia. Written by people who thought they were just passing the time. I watched the Tang dynasty at its height. I watched the Song dynasty invent printing, gunpowder, the compass, technologies that would eventually transform the world. But they didn't know that. They thought they were just solving practical problems. That's always the way. The moments that matter most rarely feel important when they're happening. What about the civilizations that failed? The ones that didn't survive? The lost ones. Yes, I walked through cities that would be forgotten completely within a century of their fall. I knew kings whose names are now less than dust. I heard languages that were old before Sanskrit was spoken and that no living human has ever heard. There was an empire in what you now call Central Asia. I won't tell you its name because you've never heard it and never will. They lasted 800 years. They built libraries and observatories and gardens that seemed like something from a dream. They believed they had discovered how to live, how to build a society that balanced power and wisdom. They fell, like everyone falls, invaded by neighbors who wanted what they had, scattered, forgotten, their books burned, their gardens buried under new cities, built by people who had no idea what had stood there before. I'm the only one who remembers them, the only one who can describe the way the light fell through their colored windows, the only one who knows the songs their children sang. Is that meaning? To carry the memory of things that would otherwise be completely lost? I don't know, but it's something. You've seen so much death, so much loss. How do you continue to care about anything? I asked myself that question for the first 3,000 years. How can you care about anything when everything ends? Why love when love leads to grief? Why build when everything crumbles? Why hope when hope is always disappointed? I didn't have an answer for a long time. I just kept moving, numb, empty, going through the motions of existence without actually living. But somewhere along the way, I realized I was asking the wrong question. What was the right question? Not how do you care despite impermanence, but how could you not? The very fact that things end is what makes them precious. If a flower bloomed forever, would you stop to look at it? If a sunset lasted until morning, would you watch? Mortality is not the enemy of meaning. It's the source of it. Humans understand this instinctively, even if they don't know they understand it. That's why they celebrate birthdays. That's why they mark anniversaries. That's why they gather for funerals. They know time is running out, and that knowledge, that terrible, beautiful knowledge, is what makes every moment worth having. I had to learn that lesson from the outside, watching mortals live with an intensity I couldn't feel, because I had nothing pushing me forward. No deadline, no urgency, no end. Eventually, I learned to borrow their urgency, to see the world through their eyes, to remember what it felt like when time mattered. I'm still learning. After 13,000 years, I'm still learning. Chapter 4. The Long Dark. Tell me about the darker periods, the times when it was harder to endure. Kael's face changed. Something closed behind their eyes. There were many dark periods. Humanity has a talent for creating suffering, but you're asking about the one you call the Dark Ages, and what came after. Yes, that was difficult. Why? Because in the ancient world, being different was strange, but often tolerated. Every village had its spirits. Every city had its gods. One more mysterious figure who didn't age, who healed from wounds, could be explained away, incorporated into the local mythology, given a role to play. But then came the time of one God, one truth, one way, and suddenly, anything outside that truth wasn't mysterious, it was evil. I'm not blaming Christianity specifically. Every monotheism goes through this phase, the certainty that there is only one right answer. And everyone who disagrees is not just wrong, but dangerous. I learned to hide in a way I never had before, not just my immortality, but everything that made me different. I pretended to age using makeup, posture, the careful cultivation of visible weakness. I pretended to die, staging accidents, disappearing, reappearing decades later as my own descendant. I became an expert in reinvention, in being no one, in passing through towns like a ghost, noticed by no one, remembered by no one, leaving no trace. It was exhausting. Centuries of performance, of never being seen, of never connecting with anyone long enough for them to notice. The loneliness of that time. I don't have words for it, even now. The plagues. You mentioned them before. The Black Death. Yes, you want to know about the Black Death. I cannot describe it to you in a way you'll truly understand. Your modern world has pandemics, but nothing like that. Nothing that killed half the people in every city. Nothing that came so fast, took so many, left so few. It started in the east and rolled across the world like a wave. I was in Constantinople when the first rumors arrived. Traders speaking of entire cities emptied, of roads lined with corpses, of a death so quick you could be healthy at breakfast and dead by dinner. I thought they were exaggerating. People always exaggerate. Then the plague reached the city. I worked as a gravedigger for 3 years during the worst of it. It was the only work available, and one of the few jobs where no one looked too closely at your face. Too many bodies, not enough hands. They needed anyone willing to touch the dead. And there were so many dead. I caught it, of course, multiple times. The fever, the swelling, the black marks in the armpits and groin that gave it its name. Each time, my body fought it off, burned through it, healed. I would wake from the fever with my sheets soaked in sweat, surrounded by the corpses of others who had caught it the same day. Do you know what that does to a person? To survive something that kills everyone around you? Not through skill, not through luck, just because you're not allowed to die. What does it do? It makes you feel like a monster, like the curse itself, like death is happening because you're there, absorbing the portion of life that should have gone to others. I know that's not rational. The plague would have killed them whether I was there or not. But rationality doesn't survive watching children choke on their own blood while you stand there, healthy, whole, unable to do anything but bury them. I remember a girl, 7 years old, maybe 8. Her entire family had died. Parents, siblings, everyone. She was the last one left, and she was dying too. She grabbed my hand as I carried her body to the pit. She wasn't dead yet, but she was close. She looked at me with those fever-bright eyes, and she asked if I was an angel, if I was there to take her to heaven. I lied. I told her yes. I told her everything would be all right. I held her hand until she stopped breathing. Then I threw her body into a mass grave with 100 others. I stopped trying to help people for a long time after that. Centuries. I just moved from place to place, never staying, never connecting, a ghost among the living. What was the point? They all died anyway. Everyone always died, and I just kept going, an empty vessel drifting through an ocean of death. How did you come back from that? I almost didn't. There was a period, perhaps 200 years, where I spoke to almost no one. I lived in forests, in mountains, in caves and abandoned ruins, places where humans rarely went. I tried to become something other than human. Since being human hurt too much, I let myself go feral, forgot how to speak, forgot my name, forgot why I had ever cared about anything. But it didn't work. The loneliness, it has its own weight, its own gravity. You can run from other people, but you can't run from the part of yourself that needs them. Eventually, it pulls you back. I returned to the world somewhere in what you call the 15th century. The Renaissance was beginning, though no one called it that yet. People were starting to look at the world differently, to question things that had been unquestionable, to believe that humans could understand, could improve, could reach beyond what they were. I let myself hope. For the first time in centuries, I thought, maybe this is different. Maybe humanity is finally growing up. Maybe the darkness is ending. That was probably naive, but a necessary kind of naive. Without hope, I'm not sure I could have continued. Chapter 5. The Awakening World. Tell me about the modern era, the centuries leading to now. The last 500 years have been accelerating, like a river that's been dammed finally breaking through. For millennia, humanity changed slowly. Generations lived and died the same way their ancestors had. But then, something shifted. I watched it happen. The printing press spreading ideas faster than any teacher could speak. The ships crossing oceans that had seemed infinite. The telescopes revealing that the universe was larger, stranger, more indifferent than anyone had imagined. Suddenly, the world was getting smaller, and at the same time, infinitely larger. I was in Florence when Galileo first turned his telescope to the heavens. I wasn't in the room, but I knew people who were. The shock of it, the terror, moons orbiting Jupiter, phases of Venus, evidence that the Earth was not the center of everything. For the church, it was heresy. For me, it was relief. Finally, humanity was seeing the universe as I had always seen it. Vast, old, indifferent to our small concerns. And then the machines came. I was in England during what you call the Industrial Revolution, the factories rising like new temples, the cities swelling with workers from the countryside, the air itself turning grey with smoke from 1,000 chimneys. I worked in a textile mill for 3 years, not because I needed money, but because I wanted to understand what was happening, what this new thing was that was transforming everything so fast. Do you know what I learned? What? That humans had found a way to multiply their power, but not their wisdom. The machines could do in a day what had taken months before, but the people running them, they were the same people, the same greed, the same blindness, the same capacity for cruelty. I watched children work themselves to death in those mills. Children younger than Enna had been when I made my bargain. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Their small fingers useful for fixing jammed machinery. Their small bodies useful for crawling into spaces adults couldn't reach. And I couldn't do anything. Couldn't expose myself. Couldn't interfere. Just watched. As I had watched for thousands of years. Sometimes I think immortality is a front row seat to all of humanity's worst moments, with no ability to look away. What about the wars of the 20th century? Kael was quiet for a long time. I don't like to talk about the wars. I understand, but if you're willing, the first one, the one they called the Great War, the war to end all wars. I was there, in the trenches, on the Western Front. I had lived through countless battles, watched armies clash with swords, with arrows, with early cannons that seemed terrifying at the time. But this was different. The scale, the brutality, the sheer mechanical efficiency of the killing. I saw men drown in mud, drown in gas, drown in the simple impossibility of surviving what was being done to them. And the worst part The worst part was that it was pointless. A war fought over pride and treaties, and lines on maps that no one would remember in a century. I joined because I thought maybe I could help. Maybe my inability to die could serve some purpose. I could carry messages through no man's land, rescue the wounded, do something. I died 14 times in that war. Bullets, shells, bayonets. Each time, I woke in the mud, healed, and had to keep going. My fellow soldiers thought I was lucky, the ones who noticed anything at all. When it ended, I thought, surely humanity has learned. Surely this horror, this industrial slaughter, surely this is the end. No one would do this again. 20 years later, they did it again. Worse. I was in Poland when the Second War began. I saw the tanks roll across the border. I saw the cities burn. I saw the trains heading east, full of people who would never come back. I knew what was happening. Everyone knew, even if they pretended not to. The camps, the systematic murder, the attempt to erase entire peoples from existence. I tried to help. For the first time in centuries, I actively tried to intervene. I joined resistance movements. I smuggled people across borders. I killed soldiers who would have killed innocents. And it didn't matter. Not really. The war ended, but not because of me. The camps were liberated, but not in time. 6 million dead, and that was just one group among many. I attended the Nuremberg trials, sat in the gallery and watched men in suits explain that they were just following orders, that they didn't know, that they weren't responsible. I wanted to stand up and scream. I wanted to tell them I had seen every atrocity humanity had ever committed, that this wasn't special, that humans had always done this to each other, that they would do it again. But what would that accomplish? So I sat and watched and added it to the weight I carry. What did the modern world teach you about humanity? That they are capable of anything. That's not an exaggeration. Anything. The greatest kindness, the worst cruelty, the most stunning beauty, the most complete destruction. I've seen humans sacrifice themselves for strangers, run into burning buildings, donate organs to people they'll never meet, give their last piece of bread to someone hungrier. And I've seen humans murder their neighbors over nothing, torture children for information, burn libraries because the books contained ideas they feared. The same species, the same minds, the same hearts. After 13,000 years, I still don't understand how both can exist in the same creature, how the hand that paints can also be the hand that kills, how the voice that sings can also be the voice that condemns. Maybe that's the curse within the curse, watching long enough to see everything, but never long enough to understand any of it. What do you make of the current age? The technology, the connection, the speed of everything. The current age is disorienting, even for me. For most of my existence, change happens slowly. A new tool might take centuries to spread from one region to another. A new idea might take generations to take root. You could watch the world shift, but it shifted like seasons. Gradual, predictable. Now, everything moves at once. A thought can travel around the world in seconds. An invention can transform daily life within a decade. Your species has changed more in the last 100 years than in the previous 10,000. I was there when the first telegraph line was laid. I thought, this is it. This is the fastest humans will ever communicate. Instantaneous messages across continents. What could possibly be faster? Then came telephones, radio, television, the internet. Now you carry devices in your pockets that contain more information than every library in ancient Alexandria combined. It's overwhelming, even for someone who has watched humanity invent writing, the wheel, agriculture. Nothing prepared me for this. Does it give you hope, all this progress? Yes and no. The technology is extraordinary. You've cured diseases that killed millions. You've built machines that can see to the edge of the universe. You've put humans on the moon, a feat that would have seemed like pure fantasy for most of human history. But the same technology that can cure also kills. The same networks that connect also divide. The same tools that could save the world could just as easily destroy it. I've seen this pattern before. Every leap in human capability brings both possibility and peril. Fire, agriculture, metal, gunpowder, the atom. Each one changed everything. Each one could have gone either way. And somehow, through luck or stubborn persistence, humanity always found a way through. Will they find a way through this? The nuclear weapons, the environmental destruction, the artificial intelligence that might soon match or exceed human thought? I don't know. For the first time in 13,000 years, I genuinely don't know what comes next. That should terrify me. But instead, I find it almost exciting. A mystery I haven't solved. A future I can't predict. Maybe that's what I needed. After all this time, something truly new. Have you ever met others like yourself? Other immortals? Kael was silent for a long moment. I've searched. For thousands of years, I've searched. Every legend of a fountain of youth. Every story of a wandering eternal. Every myth of someone who couldn't die. Occasionally, I found hints. Stories that felt different from the usual folklore. Travelers who had been seen in the same place centuries apart. Strangers who seemed to know things they shouldn't know. But I've never found another like me. Not conclusively. Not in a way that let us actually speak. Maybe they exist and hide better than I do. Maybe they exist and don't want to be found. Maybe I'm the only one. Part of me hopes I'm not alone, that somewhere out there, someone else carries this same weight, someone who would understand. But part of me hopes I am alone, because if there are others, then the traveler has done this before, to multiple people, and that seems almost worse than being a unique mistake. Either way, I haven't found them. 13,000 years of searching, and I'm still the only one I know for certain. That loneliness, it's its own kind of curse. Chapter 6, what remains? After all this time, what have you found that gives you meaning? Kael considered the question. The silence stretched. For a long time, nothing. I existed because I couldn't stop existing. I walked because standing still felt worse. I watched because I couldn't close my eyes. There was a period, perhaps 1,000 years, where I felt nothing at all. Just a kind of grey emptiness, going through the motions of life without actually living. But lately, in the last few centuries, something has shifted. What? I stopped looking for meaning in the large things, the civilizations, the revolutions, the grand movements of history. None of that lasts. None of it matters in the way humans think it does. Instead, I started paying attention to the small things. A child learning to walk, taking those first unsteady steps, falling, getting up, trying again. That happens billions of times every generation. It's ordinary, unremarkable, but it's also miraculous every single time. I watched a toddler in a park last week, trying to climb a small hill, falling, crying, getting up, trying again, falling again, and finally, reaching the top. The look on her face, pure triumph, pure joy. She has no idea that she'll forget that moment completely, that it will be buried under a lifetime of other moments. But I saw it. I'll remember it. That small victory on a small hill on an ordinary day. That's what I collect now. Small moments. An old couple holding hands on a bench. A stranger helping another stranger. A musician playing for no audience but the sky. A dog greeting its owner after a long day. These moments happen constantly, every second of every day. They don't make the history books. They don't change the world. But they're the reason the world is worth anything at all. That's what I've found. After 13,000 years, the meaning isn't in the monuments. It's in the moments. Do you still consider your immortality a curse? Yes and no. It's a curse because it separates me from everything that makes life precious. I can't truly love because everyone I love dies. I've lost count of how many times. Hundreds, thousands. Each one breaks something in me that never quite heals. I can't truly commit to anything because every commitment becomes temporary. Every home becomes a place I'll eventually leave. Every friendship becomes a countdown to grief. I can't truly hope because I've seen too much to believe things will ever be fundamentally different. Humanity doesn't change. Not really. The technology changes. The costumes change. But the core remains the same. The same fears. The same cruelties. The same occasional moments of grace. But it's also not quite a gift, but something. A perspective no one else can have. A witness to everything. A memory that stretches back to before writing existed. I carry things that would otherwise be lost. Songs no one else remembers. Stories no one else can tell. The faces of people who died before your ancestors were born. Maybe that's my purpose. Not to live, but to remember. To be a repository for all the things humanity forgets about itself. Or maybe there is no purpose. Maybe I'm just an accident. A mistake that won't stop happening. After 13,000 years, I've learned to be okay with not knowing. If you could go back to that moment with the traveler, would you make the same choice? The longest pause yet. When Kael spoke again, their voice was different, softer, older. My sister lived to be 73. She had 4 children, 11 grandchildren, 27 great-grandchildren. She never knew what I had done for her. I never told her. She lived a full life. She fell in love. She had her heart broken. She fell in love again. She raised children who drove her crazy and made her proud in equal measure. She grew old, surrounded by people who loved her. On her deathbed, she held my hand, and she said, "You've been so good to me, my whole life. How can I ever repay you?" I told her she already had, just by living, just by being there, just by being the reason I had something to protect. She smiled. That same smile I remembered from when she woke from the fever all those millennia ago, and then she was gone. Would I make the same choice? To save her? To doom myself? To trade one mortal life for an eternity of watching? Yes, without hesitation. Yes. That's the terrible truth of love. It doesn't calculate. It doesn't weigh the costs. It doesn't care about forever. It just acts. My sister got 73 years, a full life, children, joy, pain, everything that makes a life worth living. I got 13,000 years of watching, of remembering, of carrying the weight of a choice I made when I was barely more than a child. And I would do it again, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, because for those 73 years, she was happy, she was whole, she was here. That's enough. It has to be. It's all I have. I asked Kael if they have any regrets, besides the obvious one. Regrets. 13,000 years of them. Too many to count. I regret the people I could have helped but didn't, because I was too afraid of being discovered. The times I walked past suffering, because I had convinced myself it wasn't my problem. I regret the relationships I ended too soon, leaving before the goodbyes, because goodbyes had become too painful. People who deserved better than a silent disappearance. I regret the centuries I wasted in numbness, the years I spent hiding in caves and forests, running from humanity instead of walking among them. Those were years I could have been witnessing, remembering, carrying forward things that are now lost forever. But mostly, I regret the times I forgot why I was doing this, why I made the choice I made, when the weight became so heavy that I lost sight of Enna's face, lost the sound of her laugh, lost the memory of why saving her mattered so much. In those moments, the curse felt truly pointless, a burden without purpose. But then I would see something, a child playing, a couple in love, someone doing something kind for no reason at all, and I would remember, this is why. This is the world Enna got to live in. This is what her 73 years contained. And somehow, that was enough to keep going. What advice would you give to mortals who have so little time compared to you? Advice from me, Kael laughed, a soft sound with edges of sadness. I'm not sure I'm qualified. I've had 13,000 years and I still don't know what I'm doing. But if I had to say something, don't wait. Whatever it is you're waiting for, whatever moment feels like the right one, it won't come. There is no perfect time. There's only now. Tell people you love them. Say the things you're afraid to say. Do the things you're afraid to do. Because you're right to be afraid, but not of failure. Be afraid of never trying. Be afraid of reaching the end and realizing you spent your whole life preparing for a moment that never arrived. And remember that you're part of something larger. Your life, as brief as it seems, is connected to every life that came before and every life that will come after. You're a link in a chain that stretches back to the first fire, the first word, the first dream. I've watched that chain for 13,000 years. I've seen it tested. I've seen it nearly break, but it never has. It keeps going, link by link, life by life. You're part of that, whether you know it or not, whether you feel it or not. You matter in ways you can't possibly see. That's what I've learned. After all this time, every single life matters. Every single moment matters, even when it doesn't feel that way. As our conversation draws to a close, I ask Kael what comes next. 13,000 years behind them, and an unknown number stretching ahead. They look past me, at something only they can see, the same thing that's always come next. Another day, another decade, another century. I'll keep walking, keep watching, keep remembering. Maybe someday, the curse will lift. Maybe the traveler will return and release me. Maybe I'll finally find a way to rest. Or maybe not. Maybe this is forever, truly forever. Until the sun goes cold and the last human is gone and there's nothing left but me, standing in the dark, remembering a world that no longer exists. But not yet. For now, there are still children learning to walk, Still old couples holding hands. Still strangers helping strangers. For now, there are still moments worth witnessing. And as long as there are, I'll be there, watching, remembering. It's what I do. It's what I am. An immortal. A witness. A curse that learned to carry itself. For 13,000 years and counting. And with that, the interview ends. Kael rises slowly and walks toward the door. In the frame of the exit, they pause, turn back. Thank you for listening. It's been a long time since anyone asked. Then they are gone, disappeared into a world that doesn't know they exist, a world they've watched since before it knew itself. 13,000 years of memory, walking among us, waiting, watching, forever. This was a quiet archive story where the story ends, sleep begins,